Have you ever had the feeling that something changed, but no one could explain why? Not in the world around you, but inside the invisible current that seems to control everything. Maybe you woke up this morning feeling lighter. Maybe the pressure you've carried for months suddenly felt different. Or maybe the people who used to stand confidently against you have become strangely quiet. What if that isn't your imagination? What if, somewhere beyond your awareness, a decision was made that completely altered the direction of your life? Not by luck, not by coincidence, but because someone finally saw what you've endured and decided enough was enough. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story about protection. It's a lesson about power, human psychology, and why some battles are won long before anyone realizes they've even begun. If this message resonates with you, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every video here is designed to strengthen your mindset, sharpen your awareness, and help you become impossible to break. Most people think wars begin with noise. They imagine shouting, confrontation, explosions, dramatic betrayals, or public revenge. But the most important wars in life never begin that way. They begin in silence. They begin the moment someone quietly decides that what has been happening to you can no longer continue. The strange thing is, you'll probably never witness that decision being made. You'll only notice its effects. Think about your own life. There was a time when everything seemed to move against you. Every opportunity slipped away just before you reached it. Every relationship demanded more from you than it ever gave back. Every room you entered felt like a place where you had to prove your worth before anyone would even acknowledge your existence. People underestimated you, not because you lacked ability, because they confused kindness with weakness. That's one of the oldest mistakes human beings continue making. Psychology has shown us that emotionally aggressive people often mistake calmness for fear. They believe that if someone doesn't immediately fight back, they must be incapable of fighting at all. But calm isn't the absence of strength. Calm is controlled strength. And controlled strength terrifies insecure people once they finally recognize it. For a long time, you probably questioned yourself. Maybe you wondered if they were right. Maybe you tried becoming smaller just to keep peace. Maybe you apologized for things that weren't your fault simply because conflict exhausted you. Every time you sacrificed your own voice to protect someone else's comfort, you quietly trained yourself to believe your needs mattered less. That's how emotional manipulation works. It doesn't begin by controlling your actions. It begins by controlling your beliefs. Eventually you stop asking, why are they treating me this way? Instead you begin asking, what's wrong with me? That question has destroyed more confidence than failure ever could. But here's what manipulative people never expect. Human beings cannot suppress their true nature forever. Eventually the version of yourself buried beneath years of disappointment begins pushing back. Not through anger, through awareness. Awareness changes everything. The moment you recognize unhealthy patterns, they lose part of their power. The moment you stop chasing approval, people who controlled you begin feeling uncertain. The moment you stop explaining yourself endlessly, those who benefited from your confusion become uncomfortable. Because they were never addicted to controlling your life. They were addicted to controlling your perception of yourself. And then, something shifts. You don't notice it immediately. It's subtle. You stop responding instantly. You stop defending every accusation. You stop believing every criticism. You begin asking a completely different question. What kind of life would I build if I stopped trying to convince people to see my value? That single question changes the direction of a person's future. Because now your energy has somewhere better to go. Instead of feeding arguments, it feeds growth. Instead of replaying betrayal, it creates wisdom. Instead of chasing people who never appreciated your loyalty, it begins attracting people who recognize it immediately. This is where the invisible war truly begins, not against other people, against your old identity, the fearful version of you, the exhausted version, the version that believed surviving was enough. Something inside you quietly declares, no more begging, no more shrinking, no more confusing acceptance with love. Psychologists call this identity reconstruction. It's one of the most powerful transformations the human mind can experience. The old beliefs begin collapsing. The new ones aren't fully built yet. For a while, it feels uncomfortable. You lose people, habits disappear, your priorities change. You even begin questioning goals you once thought mattered. That's normal. Growth always feels like losing before it feels like winning. Most people quit during this stage because uncertainty feels dangerous. But uncertainty isn't your enemy. It's proof you're leaving the familiar behind. Meanwhile, the people who benefited from the old version of you begin noticing something they can't explain. You're becoming harder to predict, harder to manipulate, harder to intimidate. Not because you're becoming colder, because you're becoming clearer. Your boundaries no longer require permission. Your confidence no longer depends on applause. Your peace no longer depends on their approval. That's when psychologically insecure people begin experiencing something unexpected. Loss. Not necessarily losing you physically, losing influence. And influence is often more valuable to controlling personalities than affection itself. Suddenly your silence feels louder than your words ever did. Your absence feels heavier than your presence once seemed. Your calmness makes them uncomfortable because it reminds them they no longer control the emotional climate around you. Without realizing it, the balance of power changes. Completely. But here's what makes this story different. While you're rebuilding yourself, someone else notices. Not because you're asking for attention, Because genuine resilience leaves evidence. People who understand human nature recognize quiet strength immediately. They see the discipline hidden behind your silence, the wisdom growing beneath your scars, the character that survived every attempt to destroy it. And sometimes, those people become the unseen force that changes everything next. Because every life reaches a moment where someone quietly decides, this person deserves an opportunity no one else is willing to give. You may never know exactly when that decision happens, but when it does, the entire direction of your story begins changing in ways that feel impossible to explain. And in the next chapter, we'll uncover why the people who underestimated you often sense this change before you do, and why their confidence begins collapsing long before your success becomes visible. Something happened the moment you stopped trying to convince everyone you were a good person. You probably didn't notice it. Most people don't. Because the biggest changes in life rarely announce themselves. They don't arrive with fireworks or dramatic speeches. They arrive quietly, like the first crack in a frozen lake. Almost invisible at first, until the entire surface begins to break apart. The people around you sensed it before you did, not consciously, emotionally. Human beings are constantly reading energy without realizing it. Long before we analyze someone's words, our subconscious studies their confidence, their certainty, their emotional stability. That's why some people can enter a room without saying a single sentence and still command everyone's attention. It isn't charisma, it's congruence. Their mind, emotions, and actions finally agree with one another. For years, yours didn't. One part of you wanted peace. Another wanted justice. One part wanted to forgive. Another wanted to scream. That internal conflict exhausted you far more than the people who hurt you ever did. But then something changed. Instead of asking why life kept testing you, you started asking what kind of person these experiences were shaping you into. That question rewired everything. Because victims search for explanations. Leaders search for meaning. The people who underestimated you never imagined you'd make that transition. They expected pain to weaken you. Instead, pain educated you. Think about every betrayal, every disappointment, every person who walked away after promising they never would. At the time, each experience looked like a loss. Now look again. Every betrayal taught you discernment. Every rejection taught independence. Every lie sharpened your ability to recognize truth. Every lonely night forced you to become comfortable with your own company. Without realizing it, the very experiences designed to break your confidence became the foundation of it. That's how transformation works. It doesn't erase your scars. It changes what your scars mean. Meanwhile, something completely different is happening inside the minds of those who underestimated you. At first they celebrate your silence. They assume you've accepted defeat. People who rely on emotional control often mistake distance for surrender. They think your absence means they're winning. Until weeks pass, months pass, and instead of hearing your name attached to failure, they hear it attached to progress. Someone mentions you're doing well. Another person talks about a new opportunity you received. Someone else notices how different you seem. Calmer, stronger, more focused. Suddenly, the story they told themselves about you no longer matches reality. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. The human brain hates contradictions. If someone spent years convincing themselves you were weak, your success becomes psychologically uncomfortable. Now they have only two choices: accept they misjudged you, or invent new reasons to explain your growth. Most choose the second. Maybe they just got lucky. They've changed. They're pretending. Notice something. None of those explanations involve taking responsibility. Because accountability threatens the ego, and an untrained ego will protect itself even when the truth is standing directly in front of it. This is where invisible battles begin. Not between you and them. Between them and themselves. Because every time they hear your name, they're reminded of a decision they made, a chance they wasted, a person they failed to understand. That reminder grows louder over time, especially when your life continues improving without their involvement. Success has an interesting psychological effect. It forces people to reevaluate the past. The same kindness they ignored suddenly appears extraordinary. The loyalty they took for granted suddenly feels irreplaceable. The encouragement they barely acknowledge becomes something they desperately miss. Memory changes. Not because history changes, because perspective changes. Here's the irony. The version of you they suddenly admire was there all along. They simply couldn't see it while their pride was louder than their perception. But now, their own choices have become impossible to ignore. This is why regret rarely arrives immediately. Regret needs comparison. Only after experiencing people who disappoint them do they remember how consistently you showed up. Only after trusting someone who deceives them do they remember your honesty. Only after losing peace do they remember the safety your presence created. That's the cruel mathematics of human behavior. People often discover value only after access disappears. But by then, you're no longer standing still. You're moving forward. Every morning you wake up with a little less anger. Every week you spend a little less time replaying old conversations. Every month your future becomes more interesting than your past. That's real healing. Not forgetting. Outgrowing. Eventually you reach a place where proving yourself feels unnecessary. Your actions speak before your words ever need to. You stop trying to be understood by everyone, because you finally understood yourself, and confidence built on self-awareness is almost impossible to shake. People feel it immediately, even strangers. Especially those who once believed you'd never recover. That's why the atmosphere around you feels different now. You're no longer searching for permission to become who you were meant to be. You've already decided. And once a decision reaches that level of certainty, life begins responding differently. Opportunities appear, the right people arrive, the wrong people quietly leave. Not because life suddenly became easier, because your standards became higher. The war was never about defeating your enemies. It was about defeating the version of yourself that believed they determined your worth. And now, without realizing it, you've already won the hardest battle. But something even more fascinating is about to happen. Because once people realize they can no longer control you, many of them don't walk away quietly. They try one last time, one final conversation, one final manipulation, one final attempt to pull you back into the person you used to be. In the next chapter, we'll uncover why emotionally manipulative people almost always return when they sense they've permanently lost control, and why your response at that moment determines the rest of your life. There comes a moment in every transformation that no one warns you about. It isn't the day you finally heal. It isn't the day the pain disappears. It's the day the people who once believed they controlled your life suddenly realize they don't recognize you anymore. That realization doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in, quietly. They notice you aren't reacting the way you used to. Their messages don't shake you. Their opinions don't keep you awake. Their silence no longer feels like punishment. For the first time, you're emotionally unavailable to manipulation, and that changes everything. People who rely on emotional control rarely know what to do when control stops working. Their first instinct is denial. This won't last. They'll come back. They always do. So they wait. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Nothing happens. You're still moving forward. Still growing. Still becoming someone they never expected you to become. That's when denial transforms into curiosity. They begin watching from a distance. Not because they're proud of you, because they're confused. How did someone they thought was broken become so peaceful? How did the person they underestimated become so confident? How did the one they ignored become impossible to ignore? These questions become louder every time they hear your name. Because every success you experience quietly challenges the story they once told themselves. Human beings protect their ego by creating narratives. If someone treated you badly, they needed a reason. Maybe they convinced themselves you were too emotional, too difficult, too sensitive, too ambitious. Anything that justified their behavior. But your transformation begins destroying those stories one by one. Success exposes lies. Not because success is loud, because reality eventually becomes impossible to deny. Imagine carrying around a picture of someone in your mind for years. Then one day you meet them again, and they're completely different. Stronger, calmer, more confident, more fulfilled. Suddenly your mental picture no longer matches reality. Your brain scrambles to explain the difference. That's exactly what happens. The version of you they believed existed no longer exists, and they have no idea when that happened. Because real growth is silent. Nobody watches a tree grow. They only notice it once it's taller than the fence. The same thing happens with people. Day after day your progress feels invisible. Then one morning, someone who hasn't seen you in months looks at you differently. Not because your appearance changed, because your energy changed. Confidence speaks before words ever do. Peace has a presence. Self-respect has a posture. People sense these things instinctively. Even those who can't explain why. That's why emotionally immature people often become uncomfortable around emotionally healthy people. Health exposes dysfunction. Calm exposes chaos. Integrity exposes manipulation. Without saying a word, you become a mirror. And not everyone enjoys seeing themselves reflected honestly. This is usually when the final attempt begins. One unexpected message. One accidental meeting. One casual conversation. It seems harmless, almost innocent. But psychology tells us something fascinating. When people lose influence over someone, they often seek reassurance that the influence still exists, not always consciously. Sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. They're testing the emotional connection. Testing whether they can still make you react, whether your heart still races, whether guilt still works, whether old memories still control your decisions. Years ago, it probably would have. Today, something feels different. You listen without absorbing. You observe without reacting. You understand without surrendering. That's emotional maturity. Not becoming cold, becoming clear. You finally realize that closure isn't something another person hands you. It's something you create every time you choose peace over chaos. Every time you refuse to repeat unhealthy patterns. Every time you walk away from disrespect without needing the last word. That's where real power lives. Not in winning arguments, in outgrowing the need for them. The most powerful people in the world aren't emotionally unbreakable because nothing bad happens to them. They're emotionally unbreakable because they refuse to let temporary pain become a permanent identity. That is exactly what's happening to you. Slowly, your story is changing. You stop introducing yourself through what happened to you. Instead, people begin knowing you for who you've become. Someone disciplined, someone dependable, someone calm under pressure, someone whose confidence doesn't disappear when circumstances become difficult. Those qualities attract opportunities. They attract healthier relationships. They attract trust. Not because life suddenly became fair, because you've become the kind of person prepared for a different life. Meanwhile, the people who never change continue repeating the same emotional patterns. Different faces, same art jobs, same frustrations, different relationships, same endings. Because changing environments never changes unhealed habits, only self-awareness does. That's why growth isn't revenge. Growth is freedom. Freedom from constantly explaining yourself. Freedom from chasing validation. Freedom from needing everyone to understand your journey. Eventually, you realize something almost unbelievable. You no longer want revenge. Not because what happened didn't matter, because your future has become too valuable to sacrifice for your past. The anger that once fueled you transforms into wisdom. The sadness transforms into compassion. The fear transforms into confidence. And confidence creates something your enemies can never compete with: consistency. While they're busy reacting, you're building. While they're watching, you're becoming. While they're wondering what happened to you, you're becoming someone your past self could barely imagine. That is why the greatest victory is invisible. No applause, no dramatic confrontation, no final argument, just quiet transformation, one healthy decision after another, one peaceful morning after another, one confident step after another, until one day, you wake up and realize the person who once hurt you occupies almost no space inside your mind anymore. Not because you forced yourself to forget, because your new life became more interesting than your old pain. And in the final chapter, you'll discover why that moment is the greatest form of justice any human being can experience, and why the life you're building will become the answer to every doubt, every betrayal, and every obstacle that once tried to stop you. One day, you'll wake up and realize something extraordinary. The battle that once consumed your thoughts has become nothing more than a distant memory, not because the past disappeared, because you finally became bigger than it. For so long, you believed victory meant watching the people who hurt you lose. You imagined the apology, the regret, the moment they finally understood your value. But life has a strange way of rewriting our definitions of justice. Real victory isn't seeing someone else fall. It's reaching a place where their choices no longer determine your happiness. That's the freedom nobody can take from you. Think about how much energy you've spent replaying old conversations, wondering what you could have said differently, imagining different endings, searching for reasons, waiting for answers. Now imagine investing that same energy into your future, into your dreams, into your health, into your purpose, into becoming the person your younger self desperately needed. That's where your life truly begins. The greatest transformation isn't external, it's internal. The day you stop asking for permission to become who you were created to be. Because here's the truth most people never discover. Your enemies were never the biggest obstacle. Your fear of becoming fully yourself was. The opinions, the criticism, the rejection, the betrayal, those things slowed you down, but they never had the power to define you. Only you had that power, and today, you're taking it back. Every difficult season taught you something. Patience, discernment, resilience, self-respect. The people who tried to break your confidence unknowingly trained your strength. The people who doubted your future forced you to believe in yourself. The people who walked away made room for those who genuinely belong in your life. Nothing was wasted, not the tears, not the loneliness, not the sleepless nights, not even the heartbreak. Because every painful chapter prepared you for a version of yourself that couldn't have existed any other way. Now look at your life. You're thinking differently, choosing differently, responding differently. Your peace is no longer negotiable. Your boundaries are no longer temporary. Your confidence no longer depends on applause. That's real power. And here's what makes it even more remarkable. You didn't become powerful by becoming harder. You became powerful by becoming wiser. You learned that forgiveness isn't pretending nothing happened. It's refusing to let the past continue renting space inside your mind. You learned that confidence isn't proving people wrong. It's living so authentically that their opinions become irrelevant. You learned that success isn't measured by how many people admire you. It's measured by how peacefully you sleep at night. Meanwhile, the people who refuse to grow continue carrying the same emotional weight from one chapter of life to the next. Different places, different people, different opportunities, the same habits, the same excuses, the same results, because life changes only when people do, and that's the lesson they still haven't learned. But you have. You understand now that every decision shapes identity, every habit creates character, every choice builds tomorrow. That's why your future looks different. Not because life suddenly became fair, because you became intentional. You stopped feeding resentment, you started feeding purpose, you stopped chasing validation, you started building value, you stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And began asking, what am I becoming because of it? That single question changed everything. Years from now, someone will look at your life and wonder how you became so calm, so confident, so emotionally unshackable. They'll see the success, the peace, the wisdom. But they won't see the countless moments you chose growth instead of bitterness. They won't see the nights you cried without giving up. They won't see the mornings you kept moving forward even when nothing made sense. Only you will remember that journey. And that's enough. Because the strongest people aren't those who never suffered. They're the ones who refuse to let suffering become their identity. So if you're listening to this today, remember one thing. Someone else's betrayal is not your destiny. Someone else's opinion is not your identity. Someone else's rejection is not your limitation. Your story is still being written, and the next chapter doesn't belong to the people who tried to stop you. It belongs to the person you've become because they couldn't. Walk forward with confidence. Protect your peace. Trust your growth. And never shrink yourself just to make someone else comfortable. Because the greatest statement you'll ever make isn't through revenge. It's through the extraordinary life you build after everything you survived. If this message spoke to you, Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. Sometimes one message can change a mindset, one mindset can change a life, and one life can inspire thousands more. Your greatest chapter isn't behind you. It's the one you're about to write.